Good morning, everybody. My name's Ruth Dennis and I'm Principal Educational Psychologist for Bradford, and I'm just going to present a few short slides to introduce to you the Neurodiversity Future Pathway. For those of you who were at the initial meeting, you may notice that the slides are slightly changed. I've just tried to reduce the information slightly so that it can be picked up and gone through in a short period of time. Okay, so I'll just share my screen if that's okay. Okay, so here we go. So Neurodiversity Future Pathway, this is to introduce the project pilot to you as you are all in areas where the pilot will be running next year. As a starting point, what I wanted to go back to is to just help you think through why we've made this move to neurodiversity and why we're having the Neurodiversity Future Pathway. And I think a really good way of looking at that is to think back about how we've treated groups of people in the past and how we now see that in a different way. And if we think back to in history, we're quite often shocked by how we've treated individuals. So, for example, how we treated people who were gay or lesbian in the past is very different now, and we're often upset by that. If you take the example of Alan Turing there, the sort of the grand master of computing, he eventually died at his own hands because of the treatment he'd had in relation to his homosexuality. In the past, it was illegal to be homosexual. If you were homosexual, you were expected to amend, mask, hide and conform your identity in order to fit in with the norms of the day. And if you didn't conform, you were criminalised and often subject to treatment in order to cure you of your condition. If we think about how we conceptualise neurodiversity, autism, ADHD and other developmental conditions at the moment, I think there are a lot of parallels there. I think we still expect people to conform to a notion of what is normal or typical, and we also attempt to cure or shape people in a different way so they can fit in with what we see as normal. And I sometimes wonder, if we were to fast forward 30, 40, 50 years, will we see our behaviour now in the same way that we see our behaviour around homosexuality in previous ages? And will we be ashamed of how we work with children who are different? So the notion of neurodiversity is trying to move away from the idea that there's something wrong with children who are neurodiverse. What it does is acknowledges that we are all different and experience the world in different ways. And rather than seeking to diagnose or clinically identify children who are neurodiverse, what the Neurodiversity Future Pathway does is to try and look at how we can acknowledge and accommodate those differences that children may have. So the neurodiversity sees the differences related to autism, ADHD and the other linked conditions as being differences rather than deficits. And what this will require is training and support for everybody who works with children and young people who are neurodiverse. So that will be for schools and for families and for other professionals. It will require that we reconfigure some of the support that is available to children and young people so that they can access that without having to have a diagnosis. And that's not to say that we will no longer diagnose children. That will still be available, but what we want to do is to make sure that resources aren't constrained by a diagnosis. So we will no longer hear people say, I have to get a diagnosis in order to access something or other. So the new Neurodiversity Future Pathway is about becoming a needs-led rather than a diagnostic-led system. So what that means is that help, support and resources will become available to a neurodiverse population without the need for diagnosis. Neurodiversity will be recognised and acknowledged from an early stage, and neurodiversity will be valued and celebrated as well. So what will be different for schools? These are the key things I think you'll see as a school that will be different for you if you take part in this pilot and as we go forward. So schools will be able to access free training and advice about neurodiversity, and they will be supported to become a neurodiversity friendly school. This training will not only be for course teaching staff, it will be for the wider school community as well, including children, including parents, including lunchtime staff, etc. The schools will be able to access the newly developed neurodiversity profile, which we've worked up, and that will support you to identify and really hone down on the aspects of neurodiversity that you're looking at with a particular young person and how you can then support them. And this will be supported by the Neurodiversity Advice Bank, which we've developed. So the Advice Bank brings together advice from specialist professionals, including CAMS, including OT, including specialist dentistry. And this advice will be available through that advice bank rather than having to wait for a consultation with those professionals. Schools will also be able to access neurodiversity professional consultations when a child's needs are complex and can't be met just through the profile. And so the professionals involved in these consultations will include occupational therapists, educational psychologists, paediatricians, CAMS, specialist teachers, etc. And then if we do move towards carrying out a multidisciplinary assessment or diagnostic assessment, that will be school-based, so it will be working with schools, carried out in school, so that we make sure that we get the information that we need. And that information will already have been gathered through this prior process that you've been through. And finally, there will be a neurodiversity support web package, which will be available to schools once they take part in the pilot. This is my diagram that summarises those steps really, and it starts at that broadest level with the district-wide neurodiversity strategy, which is about making sure not only schools are aware around neurodiversity, but families are aware, wider services, GPs, the police, library services are all aware about neurodiversity and make reasonable adjustments to accommodate people who are neurodiverse. We then have the broad block of whole school neurodiversity support, which includes the training, neurodiversity schools and the charter. Moving on from that, there will be some children that use the neurodiversity profile and support plan, and schools will be trained to use that. And then there will be specialist neurodiversity consultations available, and for some children, a multidisciplinary assessment. And all of this will take place within that plan, do, review cycle. What we're intending to do is make this fit as neatly as possible with the existing school support and existing processes, so that it's not yet another thing for SENCOs to do. And just as an example, I'll leave this for you to have a look at in your own time, but we, as part of that broad whole school block, we'll be looking at supporting schools to become neurodiversity friendly through the Neurodiversity Friendly Charter. We'll be helping schools look at early identification for neurodiversity through a neurodiversity early identification toolkit. We'll be helping schools to put in place neurodiversity passports. And the profile, rather than focusing on autism or ADHD or developmental coordination disorder, will focus on those core skills that underpin all of those conditions, because we know that a lot of them overlap. So somebody with ADHD may have issues around regulations of emotion, engagement with learning, and also social communication. So the profile focuses on those core areas of need rather than a particular defined condition. And the support plan, as I said, will fit in with what you already use. The final bit is the electronic neurodiversity resource, which schools will be able to access, and that will include general advice, guidance and training, as well as resources, but it will also have a closed area which enables you to record the neurodiversity profile and any subsequent consultations. So the timelines and phases for that, during the second half term of the summer term, we will be piloting the profile and the whole school element with two schools each, with a view to us being ready to do the final the proper pilot starting in September. So the schools have been identified for the stage 2, and from stage 4 we'll be inviting you all to join in with the pilot then. And then from January, this will be rolled out more widely. And there is support for co-construction work with families and with other services through the Bradford's Alliance for Life Chances programme. So when you sign up for the project, we'll be able to link you up with the relevant professionals in order to progress that. So that's the general overview of the programme. So there are some links there. So if you've got any questions, if you want to email me, Lucy Eddy will be carrying out the evaluation of the project. So if it's a query about evaluation, then Lucy's who to contact, and Julia will be responsible for the health input to that project. So if you have any queries about the health input, then there's Julia's email too. Okay, so that's it for now. Please have a look through, see what you think, and get back to me if you've got any queries. Thank you. Bye-bye.